The Ashiyagama is a cast iron kettle used for boiling water at a tea ceremony. There is a studio foundry engaged in the revival of Ashiya iron casting, which is said to have ceased at the beginning of the Edo period. This is the Ashiyagama Revival Studio Foundry, located in Ashiyagama no Sato, the home of the Ashiyagama. The material, technology, design, and historical background have all been investigated and researched in detail. The modern Ashiya artisans, whose role it is to revive the Ashiyagama and give the ancient craft its first innovative step forward, are already at work. Let's observe the production process. Here we see the beach at Ashiyamachi. The preparation of a motif for the kettle begins with a sketch of the natural setting, the quay, the sands, the pines. Even assuming that the motifs of the early kettles were drawn by artists, the casting artisans themselves must have possessed considerable ability to carve those drawings into the kettle molds. The sketched scene is made into a design that forms a continuous picture when viewed from any angle. With that, the motif has been completed. Now comes the making of the mold. First of all, the cross-section of the shape of the kettle is drawn on paper. This is called a paper pattern. Half of this pattern is transferred to wood or metal, and an axis for rotating it is affixed. This is the planing board. The mold will be divided into outer and inner molds. First, the outer mold is made. The quality of the mold will depend on the soil. The soil used here in the studio foundry comes from Kanaya, where the ruins of a casting site from the Muromachi period were excavated. Here we see the planer. The planing board is installed on an outer frame. Water and clay are mixed into soil divided by particle size, and layers of casting clay are applied and planed in order from rough to fine. The finishing is done with very fine clay called hadatsuchi, or skin clay. This fine texture results in the beautiful skin of the Ashiyagama, which is known as catfish skin. This will be the upper half of the outer mold. The lower half is made in the same way. When the planing of the outer mold has been finished, and before the clay has dried, the motif drawing that was prepared beforehand is affixed to the mold. The pattern is pressed into the mold with various tracing spatulas. The trunks of pine trees flowing in a smooth, curving line, their branches and their leaves. Subtle variations in thickness, height, touch, and pressure produce a vivid, picturesque pattern. The mold for the lugs of the kettle, called kimen, is formed with clay. The lugs are the parts of the kettle into which rings called kang are hooked when the kettle is carried. A master mold is covered with clay, and then the mold is removed. A pin is added to make the hole of the lug. After drying and firing, it's embedded in the outer mold. Then the surface of the outer mold is fired. While removing moisture from the mold and thereby hardening it, this process causes fine cracks to appear in the surface of the outer mold. These will help to release the gas generated during casting. Next, the core is made. The core is a mold that fits inside the outer mold, creating the space into which the molten iron will be poured. With a rotating planing board for the core, layers of clay are planed from rough to fine. After drying, it's evenly surrounded with charcoal and fired. The lower part of the core is formed not by planing, but by packing clay into the outer mold and removing the mold. This is also fired. The core is placed in the upper part of the outer mold. This and the lower part of the mold are put together and bonded with clay. Seals are attached, and the parts are firmly braced so as not to slip. The fixed and hardened core is taken out. The lower part of the core is trimmed down by only 3 millimeters, the thickness of the kettle. To prevent the very hot iron from burning into the mold, the dried core is sprayed with soot. Soot is applied to the outer mold as well. The core is installed in the outer mold. The outer mold is carefully placed over it with reference to vertical counter marks. With that, the mold is finished. It's fixed firmly in place as is. Now let's look once again at the cross-section. Molten iron flows into the space between the molds, forming the product. One feature of the Ashiyagama is its thinness. In achieving this thinness, the method of pouring the iron is as important an element as the construction of the mold. At last, the crucial moment of pouring has arrived. This is called fuki, or blowing. Ground metal is melted in a traditional cupola furnace. The fire is lit early in the morning on the day of blowing to raise the temperature in the furnace. When the furnace has been heated sufficiently by adding charcoal, the ground metal goes in. This ground metal, called wadzuku, is iron extracted from smelted iron sand. Charcoal and ground metal are put in alternately. The molten metal is called yu. The yu is put back into the cupola furnace through a hole provided for that purpose until it reaches the proper temperature. A cupola furnace made of clay was used in the Muromachi period, too. This type of furnace has the advantage of lowering the temperature at which iron will melt and producing yu that will flow well. When the yu attains the proper temperature, it's finally time to cast the product. The temperature of the yu has reached about 1,250 degrees. With every nerve concentrated on the few seconds of pouring, the caster lifts a ladle of iron exceeding 10 kilograms and pours it into the molds, one after another. On the following day, the products are taken out. If they're unsatisfactory, all the work done up to now will have been wasted. It's a tense moment. The pattern of pines on the beach shows up beautifully. The finished kettle is then polished. This enhances the fine catfish skin effect. The inside is carefully finished with tools such as a whetstone. This kettle may not look quite the same as a muromachi piece, but the process of rusting the surface brings out the beauty and natural texture peculiar to iron. A long production process of 4 months has brought forth a modern Ashiyagama. 400 years after the craft of the Ashiya casters died out, their present-day successors are gradually unlocking the secrets of its beauty and its technology.